You know that feeling when you pick up a bargain NAS on sale, set it up in a hurry, and then a few weeks later you're staring at a blinking light, wondering why your backup never completed? I've been there clicking add to cart on the cheapest 4-bay unit I could find, only to discover that the drive bays are cramped, the CPU can't keep up with simultaneous iSCSI streams, and the whole thing becomes more of a storage fridge than a server. That's the classic buyer's regret story that makes anyone pause before hitting purchase. The question I'm going to answer today is whether the Synology DiskStation DS620slim feels like a smarter buy, or if it's just another pretty-looking box that will leave you wishing you'd spent a little more upfront. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, let's talk about the hesitation that most of us feel when we're looking at a mid-range NAS. The DS620slim sits in that sweet spot between the entry-level 2-bay units and the heavyweight 12-bay rack mounts. It promises a 6-bay chassis, an Intel Celeron J3355 processor that can turbo up to 2.5 GHz, and 6 GB of DDR3L memory, all housed in a compact, slim footprint. That sounds like a lot on paper, but the real test is how it performs once you actually load it with drives, assign it a role, and let it run 24/7 in a home office or a small business environment. I started by unboxing the DS620slim the way any cautious buyer would. I checked the box for any signs of damage, made sure all the mounting screws and the power cable were present, and verified that the hardware matched the spec sheet. The unit arrives sealed, which is a nice touch for anyone who worries about tampering before it reaches them. One thing to note, however, is that the drives and memory aren't pre-installed. That means you'll have to open the chassis, snap in your own HDDs or SSDs, and insert the RAM module yourself. For most tech-savvy folks that's a non-issue, but if you're buying this as a plug-and-play solution, you need to be comfortable with a bit of hands-on work. Once the drives are in place, the first thing you'll notice is the DSM Manager operating system booting up. DSM is Synology's claim to fame. Its UI feels more like a desktop OS than a typical router interface, and the apps library is extensive. I set up the DS620slim as an iSCSI target for a VMware ESC host in my home lab, because that's a common use case for this class of device. The Celeron processor, despite being modest, handled the iSCSI traffic without choking. When I ran a series of sequential read/write tests using the built-in storage analyzer, I saw sustained speeds around 150 megabytes per second on a RAID 5 array of 4 TB drives. That's fast enough for most backup and archive tasks, and more importantly, the latency stayed low enough that my VM never complained about disk I/O throttling. Now, the practical strengths. First, the 6-bay design gives you a lot of flexibility. You can mix HDDs and SSDs, build a RAID 10 for extra redundancy, or keep a hot spare ready for quick swaps. Because the chassis is slimmer than most 6-bay models, it fits nicely on a crowded shelf or under a desk without taking up the space that a traditional tower would. Second, the Celeron J3355, while not a powerhouse, is a dual-core chip with a respectable turbo boost. In everyday scenarios, media streaming, occasional file serving, and light virtualization, it provides more than enough headroom. Finally, the 6 GB of DDR3L memory is pre-installed and locked, meaning it's not something you can accidentally remove, which is a small but nice safety net for less experienced users. On the flip side, there are practical weaknesses you need to keep in mind. Because the memory is soldered onto the board, you can't upgrade it later. If your data needs grow beyond the current workload and you start running more intensive Docker containers or multiple virtual machines, you might bump into a memory ceiling quickly. Also, the Intel Celeron J3355 is a low-power chip. It's efficient, but it doesn't have the multi-threaded muscle of an Intel Xeon or even an AMD Ryzen. That means if you push the DS620slim to handle heavy simultaneous backups, media transcoding, and a busy iSCSI target all at once, you'll notice the CPU hitting its turbo limit and the system throttling back. In my tests, adding a second active iSCSI LUN and a concurrent Plex transcoding job caused a noticeable dip in throughput. Still usable, but not ideal for high-performance environments. Another hidden trade-off is power consumption. The DS620 Slim is marketed as slim, but the 6 drives and the active cooling fan still draw a decent amount of wattage. In a 24/7 setup, you're looking at roughly 30 to 35 W idle, which translates to a noticeable electricity bill over a year. If your priority is a truly low-power NAS, you might want to consider a 2-bay model with a lower power processor instead. The Slim moniker also hides the fact that the front